Hello everybody and welcome to History Bite number 159, dated January the 16th, 2021. I'm Walter, your mobile historian and blue-collar scholar. This History Bite is entitled U.S. Presidents Who Have Skipped Their Immediate Successors' Inauguration. Indeed, when President Donald Trump made the declaration that he would not be attending incoming President Joe Biden's inauguration, a lot of Americans were very surprised at this, saying to themselves, oh, well, who does that? I mean, every president attends the inauguration of his successor, right? Wrong. Indeed, with our somewhat civically challenged American population, a lot of people thought that this was an unprecedented event. Obviously, President Trump not wanting to attend Joe Biden's inauguration? Like, no president has ever done that, right? Wrong. Contrary to what you may believe, three former presidents who were in office well before Donald Trump also decided to blow off their successor's inauguration, all right? And thus, like the Bible says, there is nothing new under the sun. It has happened before, and it will happen again. All right? Everything happens in cycles. So, three former presidents of the United States had decided in the past to blow off their successor's inauguration. All right? Those reasons were personal, political, and they had other things going on. It's not a rule that you have to attend your successor's inauguration, though it is done as a matter of courtesy and tradition. Three former presidents, however, couldn't have cared less about that courtesy or tradition, and obviously, neither does President Trump. 'Tis no matter, though. Let's stick to the past here. The three former presidents who also decided to blow off their successor's inauguration were as follows. President John Adams, number 2, President John Quincy Adams, number 6, and President Andrew Johnson, number 17. Starting with President John Adams, with his defeat in the election of 1800, President John Adams certainly was thus the first American president to turn over the government to an incoming president, of a rival party. This was a very significant transfer of power because the transfer between Washington and Adams, all right, was the same party. Okay, but the transfer from Adams to Jefferson was a transfer from the Federalist Party to the Democratic Republican Party. And thus the Adams-Jefferson transfer was the first time in American history, if you didn't know, that one party passed power to another party, to a rival party. So that's how America passed the republicanism test. A republic can only survive when the incumbent party peacefully passes power to the opposition. It was in 1801 that happened for the first time. But anyway, with his defeat in the 1800 election, Adams, was very bitter man at this. And that was coupled with the fact that he was still grieving, the loss of his son Charles, So, he just wasn't in the mood, just wasn't feeling it. And on Inauguration Day, March 4th, 1801, he departed the White House at around 4 o'clock in the morning and boarded a stagecoach headed for Baltimore, the first stop on his long journey home back to Quincy, Massachusetts. Okay? So that's John Adams, all right? The next president, the second president to do this was his firstborn son, nearly 3 decades later, in 1829, John Quincy Adams, the 6th President of the United States. With John Quincy's defeat in the 1828 presidential election to Andrew Jackson, he too had no desire whatsoever to attend the inauguration of Andrew Jackson. Unlike his father and Thomas Jefferson, who had been friends for, virtually all the time they had known each other before that, Andrew Jackson and John Quincy Adams were very fierce, bitter rivals. They could not stand, they loathed one another, and had loathed each other ever since the election of 1824, which Andrew Jackson claimed Adams had stolen due to a corrupt bargain between John Quincy and Henry Clay. Read more about the 1824 election to understand what I'm talking about. All right. So Andrew Jackson felt that John Quincy Adams had stolen that election from him, and thus he vowed to defeat John Quincy in the 1828 election, which is exactly what occurred. And of course, with that being said, John Quincy Adams left the White House well before Andrew Jackson's inauguration on March 4th, 1829. Adams is said to have been riding his horse, all right, and only knew of the completion of the swearing in when he heard the cannons roar, okay, indicating that the new president had been sworn in, okay. Before I go to the last former president who skipped off on his successor's inauguration, Thomas Jefferson's inauguration on March 4th, 1801, as the third president, was the first presidential inauguration where the Marine Band played. All right? Just thought you'd like to know that. Okay? And last but not least, all right, the most recent president to completely blow off his successor's inauguration was Andrew Johnson in 1869, 40 years after John Quincy Adams blew off Andrew Jackson's inauguration. Okay? Andrew Johnson is an American president a lot of people have never heard of, though he was, a very, very influential president, coming in on the heels of Abraham Lincoln's assassination. All right? Andrew Johnson, certainly was one of our most ineffective presidents. And for the record, folks, he was the first one to be impeached. And he was only acquitted by one vote. All right? So, with that being known and said, Andrew Johnson, who refused to attend the inauguration of his successor, Ulysses S. Grant, all right, in 1869, unlike the previous situations, Andrew Johnson and Grant did not run against each other. Indeed, Grant had run against former New York Governor Horatio Seymour, incumbent New York Governor Horatio Seymour. And while Grant buried Seymour in the Electoral College, he barely beat him in the popular vote. So in the popular vote, it was a fairly close election, but in the Electoral College, the 1868 election was very, very broad in margin, all right? So Johnson himself was so unpopular that even his own party dumped him, choosing not to run him for president, okay? But the beef between Johnson and Grant came from Johnson's, unique obstructionism, where he did everything in his power to obstruct, the implementation of federal civil rights laws. And Grant, who was greatly in support of federal civil rights laws to help out African Americans, both, those who had been formerly enslaved and those who had already been free, the laws helped them in much the same ways, okay? But Grant was very much in favor of these laws. Johnson, very much opposed to them. And due to a litany of other political disputes, Johnson and Grant essentially couldn't stand each other by 1869, okay? And both were well aware of the other's dislike, all right? That was blatantly obvious. Sometimes people are unaware that another person doesn't like them, all right? The feeling was mutual. They couldn't stand each other, and thus Andrew Johnson refused to attend the inauguration of Ulysses S. Grant on March 4th, 1869, as the 18th president of the United States of America. All right? So, that being said, those are the three former presidents in American history who did not attend the inauguration of their immediate successor. Once again, they were John Adams in 1801, John Quincy Adams in 1829, and Andrew Johnson in 1869. John Adams was the second president of the United States. John Quincy Adams, his son, was the 6th President of the United States. And Andrew Johnson was the 17th President of the United States. John Adams served as the 2nd President of the United States from 1797 to 1801. John Quincy Adams served as President of the United States from 1825 to 1829. And Andrew Johnson served as President of the United States from 1865 to 1869. Okay? So if you have any questions or controversies, please leave them down below and I'll be happy to answer them. Okay? If you have not already done so, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would greatly appreciate it. It costs you nothing to do, and it obligates you in no way, shape, or form. All it does is allow you to be able to more easily come to my channel and more easily see my videos. It is totally free, folks. So if you have not subscribed, please just hit that little red subscribe button and that little bell, and we are in business. Thank you so much for listening to this video. I hope you learned a thing or two from it. It brings me great pleasure to teach. Anytime I get to teach, my heart is delighted. All right? So take care, stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you at the next bite.